Viola is a dumb loser who is so ugly that her parents abandoned her in the forest. Fortunately, she gets adopted by a lolly witch, and she decides to live a fun life with her. Some years later, while Alyssa is out shopping with Viola, turns down Viola's request for a phoenix, she begins throwing a tantrum, drawing attention to themselves, and causing her to fold. Later on, Gigrous Chad mocks Alyssa for being too soft on Viola, and advises her to discipline Viola a bit, but Alyssa still doesn't want to hear her out. Afterwards, Alyssa ponders on what Gigrous' mum told her, and thinks of ways to teach Viola some manners, but she suffers immediate amnesia when Viola thanks her for buying what she wanted. Later on, Alyssa complains about people treating her like Viola's kid to the witches of the West Pals, and they advise her to change up Viola's mature look. However, she refuses to listen to them as it's what Viola wants to wear. Changing up the topic, Gurko reminds her that Viola may get a man soon, and Alyssa accepts her fate without any arguments, saying she'll support her. Just then, Viola barges into the room, bringing in the phoenix she had just summoned, and Alyssa tells her to get rid of it, leading to a fight between the two, while the others watch them, realizing that they should use contraceptives to avoid the stress of parenting. And after having a fun time together, they head back home. Later that night, Alyssa decides to have the birds and bees talk with Viola. However, Viola states that it has never crossed her mind to date, and instead says that she'll be ready to execute whoever approaches Alyssa while looking like Jeffrey Dahmer. After dinner, Viola tries to figure out why Alyssa suddenly brought up the dating topic and starts panicking as she thinks Alyssa has found a boy toy, begging her to stay single like most otakus. In response, Alyssa states that she hasn't thought about dating, although she would do so if Viola wanted a dad. However, this makes Viola more worried. To calm her down, Alyssa says she wouldn't want to date, as she is content with just the both of them, and gets nostalgic when Viola grabs her hands. The following morning, Viola requests for a familiar, and Alyssa finally realizes why she has been into summoning recently. After shredding the phoenix, she hands her a book to summon more basic animals instead of fantasy beasts, but Viola seems down as they aren't as cool as what she wants, and eventually settles on summoning a cat. However, she changes her mind after seeing how excited Alyssa is, fearing that the cat will take her attention from her. After a while of arguing, Viola asks if her aunties have familiars, and Alyssa reveals that Giriko has a snake, but doesn't talk about Luna since she keeps masochists as pets. Hearing this, Viola asks why she doesn't have a familiar, and in response, she explains that she doesn't need one since she helps her out. The following day, Viola shows up to the house with a flower seedling, claiming she wants to start small by taking care of the plant, which makes Alyssa glad, who encourages her to take good care of it. Unexpectedly, the phoenix shows up and guilt trips them into making it their familiar. A few days later, Viola shows up at Lyra's shop, requesting poisonous herbs, which freaks Lyra out, and while handing her some weed, she expresses how surprised she is that Viola is shopping by herself, calling when they first met. At that time, the thought that someone abandoned a baby pissed her off, and she asked why Alyssa wants to take her in, who replied that Viola had a lot of magical energy, so she wants to teach her to control them, which would be difficult for human parents. Understanding her reasons, Lyra agreed to help out, offering to be her milk factory. After handing her what she needs, Viola thanks Lyra, stating that she owes her, but she says she shouldn't worry about it, stating that Alyssa was even a bigger problem than her, and proceeds to narrate how Alyssa panicked while trying to take care of Viola as a baby. At that time, she had to talk some sense into her, and Lyra gave her pieces of advice to resolve all her worries. After a while of talking, Lyra reassured Alyssa that she was a good parent, and this consoled Alyssa. While they are still talking, Alyssa walks into the shop, asking after Viola, and she rushes to hug her, stating that they were just talking about her. While watching the two, Lyra states that she should probably get along with her son better, and Alyssa asks after him. As she tries calling him to join them, he calls Herald Hag, which triggers her, causing her to rush to his room, while the others awkwardly listen to her treating him like an abusive boyfriend. The next day, while Alyssa and Viola work on their farm, Fennel meets them there and informs her that he came to buy some stuff from her. As she thanks him for always patronizing her, he blushes while replying that he always looks forward to seeing her every month, and this causes Viola to go into serial murderer mode. Later on, Alyssa apologizes to him and scolds Viola for always bullying him. Instead of feeling remorse, she replies that he became her enemy for trying to be her dad when they first met, and states that she hates his guts for always hitting on Alyssa.
Come on now, dog. Come on, man.
In response to this, Alyssa says he's like a little brother to her, and this deals heavy emotional damage on Fennel, while Viola basks in his agony. Later on, while handing him his monthly stock, Alyssa thanks him for always buying so much from her, but he replies that it's because her goods are top-notch. While they talk, Phoenix shows up, surprising him, and Viola informs him that it's her familiar. Hearing this, he tells her not to trouble Alyssa by picking up strays, and this triggers her. Before leaving, he makes up his mind to get a one-way ticket out of her bro zone before it's too late, and decides to use a pickup line on her. But as he approaches her, his brain becomes as useless as Sakura, leading him to ask her a dumb question, which only makes her worried about his mental state. To make matters worse, Viola starts making fun of his epic flop, and while he tries getting his clap back, she orders the Phoenix to pop his head. Just then, Alyssa meets the Phoenix trying to snack on Fennel and stops it from doing so, placing his head on her lap to check on him, which makes his heart beat louder than a Syrian. After scolding Viola, she apologizes to him while seeing him off, and he tells her not to worry about it, stating that it's Viola's way of goofing around. Also, he states that he considers Viola as family, and this makes Alyssa glad as she thanks him for caring for her while putting on a big smile, making him realize he can't compete with Viola. Some days later, Luna and Gurko arrive at the house for some tea time, and before heading in, Luna begins introducing her BDSM squad to Alyssa, causing her to freak out. Finally, Luna agrees to send away her adult entertainment crew, and Gurko presents her gift to Alyssa. Later on, she explains that it's like a photo album that stores memories, and Viola asks to see photos of Alyssa when she was a kid. Seeing how cute the photos are, Viola turns into a human waterfall and comments that she would have turned Alyssa to a porcupine to prevent her from being kidnapped, which creeps the girls out. Not satisfied with what she has seen, she asks Gurko to show her more photos, and they soon come across a photo of Luna practicing fortune-telling, so she explains that she comes from a family of fortune-tellers. Soon after, she finds out that Gurko crafts magic items, and she reveals the magic adult toy she's working on. Lastly, they reveal that Alyssa works with herbs, and Viola is amazed that they were able to do what they love as jobs. When asked what she liked, she replies that she is interested in poultry, and the Phoenix follows this by subtly dissing human jobs, bragging about freeloading off the energy from nature, which makes Gurko want to turn it into Thanksgiving turkey. Later on, Viola is amazed that they've known each other since they were kids, and Alyssa gets mentally drained just thinking back on how she babysat them. However, she admits that they helped her out too, claiming that she is glad they are her friends, and after Luna ruins the moment by including her boy toys in the album, Alyssa chases them home. Later at night, Viola gets upset when is told that she has a cold, and even while she is obviously sick, she keeps denying the fact. However, after a while, she finally admits to being sick. However, she makes up her mind not to lose to her sickness, as she recalls that Alyssa once told her fever is when her body is battling against a sickness. Before leaving, Alyssa puts an ice pack on her to bring her fever down, and when Viola requests a meal, Phoenix begins cooking himself, but Alyssa stops him in time. While Alyssa leaves to prepare the meal, Viola gets scared to fall asleep as she fears that she'll get a weird dream, and her magic may go berserk, like it usually does while she is sick. After throwing up, Viola feels a bit better, and Alyssa tells her she has to go shopping to get what she needs to prepare the meal, which makes Viola grab her, begging that she shouldn't leave her. After a while of trying to put her to bed, Phoenix suggests he sings her a lullaby and sends waves that knock her faster than Mike Tyson. Later on, Viola dreams about a mysterious woman telling her to remember her and wakes up to meet Alyssa, who informs her her meal is set. When she asks if she has manifested any dreams, Alyssa says she hasn't, and Viola feels confused as she can't remember what she dreamt about. The following day, Viola gets back on her feet, which surprises Alyssa. However, they soon find that she has gotten Phoenix sick, and the two get busy taking care of it. The following day, while Fennel picks up a rush order had made from Glind, he requests a girlfriend as payment for stressing him out, but Fennel tells him to make one for himself, which triggers him. After arguing for a while, he swallows his pride, pleading with Fennel to set him up with someone, and eventually forces him to agree to his request.
I'm gonna come. Oh.
The following day, while Fennel introduces Viola to Glind, he is stunned when she practices her fatality moves on him and scolds him for suddenly hooking her up with Glind. After apologizing, he asks that she just have tea with him and tells her to rudely refuse Glind's date request if she doesn't want to. After some convincing, she agrees to go on a date with him if Fennel meets her conditions and makes him grovel for her help. Later on, they reintroduce themselves at a cafe, and Glind praises Fennel for setting him up with someone that's hotter than Chun-Li, but he responds by giving him some caution tips. After hearing how they became buddies, she immediately tries getting some dirt about Fennel, and Glind happily agrees to give up Fennel if she lets him smash, which triggers Fennel. While talking, the two begin hitting it off, and Fennel mocks her for being a muscle brain, so she threatens to make him more cursed than Sukuna, which scares the crap out of him. While trying to know more about her, Glind gets worried as she keeps rambling on about Alyssa, and her mood suddenly turns dark, which proves Fennel's point of her psycho mentality to Glind. However, Glind comments that she is a kind person for making time for him, totally ignoring her threats towards Fennel, which pisses him off. Immediately, he starts complimenting Alyssa. The two get triggered and threaten him, which makes him freak out. After they calm down, she praises him for realizing how great Alyssa is and accepts him as her friend on the condition that he doesn't hit on Alyssa, which makes him happy. However, it's short-lived as she admits that he'll never go beyond the bro zone. Afterward, Glind feels down that she isn't interested in him, but Fennel tells him not to lose hope, stating that he supports him as she'll become less protective of Alyssa if she gets a man. Unfortunately, Viola overhears his plan while returning his wallet, and he immediately runs for his life. Later on, Viola brings Glind home and introduces him to Alyssa as her friend. However, she notices that he seems traumatized by her. Meanwhile, Fennel becomes a full-course meal for one of her monsters. The following day, Alyssa returns from town holding a mysterious item, and Viola is in shock when she reveals a giant egg. To calm her down, Alyssa explains that she's egg-sitting for Geeta and Malak as they're on a mission together, then tells Viola to hold the egg for a bit. However, Viola is too scared, thinking she'd probably drop it, so Alyssa explains that the eggs are pretty tough, stating that Geeta is also worried about dropping it by accident. Just then, Phoenix joins them, and they introduce the egg to him, after which he makes comments that Viola should care for it like a big sister. This makes her want to care for the egg, so Alyssa suggests she perform a tradition of praying for the egg's health in a bath. However, Phoenix thinks it's basically hard-boiling the egg, which triggers Viola's protective instinct. Since she still wants to do something for the egg, Alyssa suggests she read a story to it, so Viola gets the idea of showing it a photo album of Alyssa. However, Phoenix turns down her idea and suggests he sing it a song instead. However, they settle on Viola just talking to the egg while Alyssa holds on to it. Later that day, the couple arrives to get their egg and thanks Alyssa for babysitting it with a boiled ostrich egg. While they talk, Phoenix shows up, and Malak is shocked to see such a huge bird. Meanwhile, Geeta notices Viola staring at the egg, so she tells her to hug it before they leave, catching Viola off guard. After Geeta assures her everything will be fine, she hands her the egg, and Alyssa is excited that she finally holds it, while Viola promises to support the child. The following day, as Fennel heads to the house to have dinner with Alyssa, he gets transported to a playground by Viola, who says it's a making club, revealing that she wants him to make new friends and stop hitting on Alyssa. This was her way of getting back at him for setting her up with Glind, and soon after, he finds out that she summoned a monster to munch on him, then bailed on him, leaving him to be devoured by it. Some days later, Alyssa informs Fennel that Viola is out running some errands, and he rushes over there faster than Minato, only to find Glind having a tea party with her, causing him to use All Might's smash move on his face. After Fennel cools off, Glind explains that he was fixing the furniture there, and Fennel begs him to hurry up so he can spend some alone time with Alyssa. However, he replies that he can't leave them alone because Viola instructed him to get in his way, and the two get into a fight. While listening to them bicker, Alyssa asks if Glind is interested in elves, and he starts talking about the mental image he has of them. However, Fennel throws wrecking balls at his ideas of elves, stating that his village is filled with old hags, and Glind crumbles in tears. To cheer Glind up, Alyssa tells him about a mystical mana tree there that beautifies the place. However, Fennel ruins the moment, stating that it's just a hangout zone for old geezers. Afterward, Alyssa reveals that she stayed there for a while with Fennel's family and states how she met Fennel. Meanwhile, each time Glind tries to put elves on a pedestal, Fennel keeps shattering his fantasies, causing Glind to lash out at him. Just then, they notice their conversation seems to bother Alyssa, so they decide to talk about magic to change the topic. To lighten things up, Alyssa mentions that elves are all well known for their archery skills, and Fennel replies that they honed their aim since they were bored, ruining the idea of being special. Seeing Glind upset, Alyssa says Fennel is just being critical about his race, commending him for being honest, and Fennel admits that he actually loves his hometown. While they talk, Alyssa admits that she likes the elfin village, and Fennel takes the opportunity to ask her to return to his village with him. Just then, Phoenix and Viola show up behind him, emitting murderous haki, and Phoenix immediately goes on the attack. At the end of the day, Fennel feels sad that he was interrupted by Viola, and while Glind consoles him, he looks on the bright side, as he had a nice moment with Alyssa. A few days later, Alyssa and Viola head to Pondos farm to get some potatoes, but they are shocked to find that the plants have come to life. After begging them to keep it a secret from Lyra, Pondo explains that his plants were not doing well, and one day he met Gyurko, who gave him a weird fertilizer that turned them to Frankenstein. Upon hearing this, Alyssa calls up Gyurko to fix the problem, but Pondo says he prefers the plants that way, causing Alyssa to scold him and threaten to tell Lyra about them. While he tries convincing Alyssa about the potatoes, Viola becomes interested in them, and he takes the chance to teach them about the various types of potatoes there. This strengthens Alyssa's decision to turn them back to normal. However, Viola and Pondo begin pleading with her. Unexpectedly, Lyra shows up, stating that she suspected something was up with him and proceeds to nuke him for his actions. Afterward, Gyurko shows up and resolves the situation, after which Lyra sends them off with some potatoes as an apology for troubling them. The following day, Alyssa finds that her farm looks like a scene from The Walking Dead, and Viola suddenly drags her to his in a shed while they watch as their plants act out the King Kong vs. Godzilla fight. When Alyssa asks to know what's happening, Viola explains that she tested out a more potent version of Gyurko's potion on their farm, and Alyssa screams out in anger, attracting the monsters to them. To avoid any problems, Viola tells her to stay quiet, stating that they'll finish off whichever monster wins, but to their surprise, the monsters pull off a Goku fusion and cause more commotion to the farm, while Viola is amazed by it. Some days later, Phoenix meets with Viola to inform her of someone who has an urgent favor to ask, and he is shocked to see a creature made of bums. As she rushes to show Alyssa, she tells her that it's a fairy, explaining that fairies aren't necessarily humanoid creatures, which upsets Viola. After the fairy introduces itself to them, Alyssa asks why it came to them, and it requests that they stop its brother. After this, the two head to a mansion where they meet Anna, and right off the bat, she thinks Viola is the witch since she has bigger knockers, which triggers Alyssa. Later on, she shows them to her garden, mentioning that none of her flowers has bloomed, and states that she's glad that they're here to investigate the issue, then offers them a gold bar as an incentive to solve the problem. As she leaves them to make some tea, Hip shows up and reveals that her brother is the cause of the issue, then leads them to where he is. When he shows up, Viola can't hold back laughter as he looks like a ball of butts, and he introduces himself as Sweet Cheeks. Just then, he gets pissed that Hip's brought strangers to their garden, and the two get into a fight. When Alyssa tries explaining things to him, he replies that she shouldn't butt in, stating that he's doing this for Anna's sake. And just then, Anna shows up with a rough-looking dude, introducing him to them as her fiancé. She adds that they are to head to his hometown, but have to cancel their plans due to the problem in the garden. And while the dude is acting smug, Sweet Cheeks sends a durian fruit at him, turning him into a fountain of blood. After they leave, it becomes clear to the girls that he's using the garden to keep Anna around, acting like an overprotective dad to her, however. Alyssa tells him not to judge her fiancé based on his looks. Just then, Viola suggests breaking them up and Sweet Cheeks immediately jumps on board with her idea, but Alyssa stops them in their tracks, even though she understands why he's acting that way. Following this, they all agree to find out more about the dude before confronting him, and Sweet Cheeks promises to use him as fertilizer when they catch him cheating. Viola then whips out a magic mirror to spy on the dude, and after taking a look at some of his memories, they realize that he is actually nicer than Tanjiro. However, to everyone's surprise, Sweet Cheeks is still not satisfied, and Alyssa understands that he's acting out because he'd miss Anna. Considering how he feels, Viola suggests he tell Anna how he feels in person, and while they try to explain things to her, Anna shows up. When she tries showing Sweet Cheeks to Anna, she finds that the fairies are as visible as John Cena in her eyes. Means that humans without magic can't see fairies, and Viola feels bad as she was insensitive to how Sweet Cheeks felt about it. To their surprise, Sweet Cheeks suddenly agrees to restore the garden so they can head back home, and while she wails over the issue, Alyssa tries explaining why Viola is talking to a ghost to Anna. A few days later, the crew returns to the garden, which annoys Sweet Cheeks as he has already agreed to restore the garden, but Alyssa states that they're just there to visit. When Phoenix sees the fairies, he explains that someone must have really cherished the garden enough to produce magical creatures, adding that they must have had a butt fetish since the fairies manifested that way. Getting them back on topic, Alyssa reveals that there's a way to make fairies visible to Anna if they get her consent, and Hip is glad to hear such news, but doesn't get the same vibe from Sweet Cheeks. Following this, they meet with Anna to tell her about the fairies, and Sweet Cheeks gets very nervous about it. While talking, Anna mentions that since her father passed away, she felt safe in the garden as she feels like he is watching over her there. And later on, Viola gets frustrated as she knows Sweet Cheeks was actually watching over Anna. Although Sweet Cheeks is sad that she'll never see him, he decides to restore the garden and let her go. However, Alyssa decides to talk a bit with him. Later on, Anna's fiancé meets with her at the garden while she's waiting on Viola and Alyssa, and while they are talking, the garden suddenly gets filled with roses, and seeing the smile on Anna's face makes Sweet Cheeks satisfied. Before heading back, the fairies thank Alyssa for helping them convey their feelings to Anna, and the couple waves the witches goodbye. Some days later, Viola is excited to bake something for them, and after a while in the kitchen, she presents her dish to Alyssa, who is shocked to see piles of hot dookie staring at her. Although Viola seems very happy with what she made, Alyssa doesn't know if she should scold her for playing with her food. However, as Viola starts feeling bad that they didn't turn out as good as she wanted, she immediately folds and starts praising her to cheer her up. Even when she tries so hard not to see the food as poo, Alyssa can't get the thought out of her head and beats herself up for it. When Viola suggests she try one, she counters her offer by proposing they bake more cookies with other flavors that won't look like a dookie. However, Alyssa almost bursts out laughing as the cookies all look like dookie rainbows, and Viola simply thinks that she is having fun. As they've made too many cookies, Viola suggests that they deliver them in plastic bags as gifts to their friends, making Viola realize that something is wrong. After apologizing for acting weird, she realizes that it actually tastes good, but the shape of the cookie forces her to burst out laughing, and later on, they invite the group over to enjoy the cookies together. After this, while Viola prepares to sleep, Alyssa shows up to put her to bed, referring to a scary story about the Sandman. However, Viola laughs at her story, claiming it's made up as she shows the real Sandman to Alyssa, which scares the crap out of her. Although Alyssa seems to be peeing her pants, Viola seems excited to see him, and he proceeds to confirm that the scary stories about him aren't true before handing her his autograph. After this, Alyssa asks why he's in their house, and he explains that he's suffering from insomnia, which made him crash into their house while flying by. Viola then adds that she tried reading him some stories to get him to sleep, and Alyssa proposes he use his sleeping sand on himself, but he turns down her suggestion, stating that the sand is more addictive than crack. When Viola suggests they take care of the stress that's causing him to lose sleep, he replies that it's more complicated than she thinks, and that she'll understand when she grows older. To know the next step to take, the two ask what's stressing him out, and he replies that his wife left him, adding that he's having some pains in his bladder and joints too. Although Phoenix's healing beam can't bring his wife home, Viola suggests they heal his pains with it and put him to bed with his sleeping waves. However, Alyssa kicks against it since calling it out in the middle of the night is inappropriate, so they decide to introduce him to Phoenix the following day. When she offers him some milk to relax, he gets annoyed as it reminds him of his competitor in the sleep fairy market that pours milk on people to make them sleep. And to make matters worse, Viola admits that it sounds better than pouring sand in people's eyes. Finally, he agrees to listen to a lullaby. However, Alyssa gets creeped out by him staring at her, so she tells him to try closing his eyes, which makes him spaz out as he starts overthinking about sleeping. After failing to put him to sleep, the two decide to take him to see the doctor the next day, and at the end of the consult, he comes out feeling a lot better. Before leaving, he hands them bail of his valuable sand as thanks for helping him and heads out. Later that night, Alyssa informs Gurko of what happened, and she flips out when she finds out that she has his sleeping sand, stating how expensive it is. After hearing how valuable it is, Alyssa ends up not sleeping for some nights, worrying about its safety. Some days later, Luna shows up at the house with fresh ingredients and asks Alyssa to teach her to cook. However, she angrily turns her down even when she repeatedly asks her. Seeing how desperate she is, Viola tries convincing Alyssa to help out, but she warns that she may end up destroying the house, which scares Viola. After a while, Luna explains that being extremely bad at cooking is the price she paid for having great fortune-telling abilities, although she makes up for this by hiring a 5-star chef. However, she says she would like to make a decent meal for herself, and even when she tries making a simple sandwich, it turns into a hideous monster. After much begging, Viola says she'll feel bad if they send Lena home, and Alyssa hesitantly agrees to teach her. They start by trying to make some salad, but it ends up becoming a veggie octopus, and she fails at making some soup later on. After a couple of attempts, she finally makes a somewhat edible meal, which excites the crew, and Alyssa adobes they keep the momentum going by making hot cocoa. However, Luna points out that the phenomenon doesn't happen when she makes beverages, adding that the meals have minor side effects when consumed. Soon after, Phoenix joins them, and Luna feeds it one of her dishes, which makes Alyssa panic. Immediately, it explodes and transforms into a whole new species of bird. At the end of their cooking session, Alyssa asks Luna her true reason for coming to see her, and she reveals that she had a vision about someone she knows visiting them, causing Alyssa to lose her mind in panic. As Luna tries calming her down, one of her Area 54 dishes suddenly nukes the house, but Luna protects everyone and compensates them in full. The next day, Viola notices that Alyssa is acting weird, which worries her, and she also observes that Phoenix isn't its usual self as well. So, they take Phoenix to the hospital, where they meet Nurse Sheeta, and they complain that it hasn't returned to its normal form for a few days. Although she doesn't know much about what's happening, she directs them to her Kikla, who specializes in mythical creatures, and she almost kidnaps it. After Sheeta scolds her, she takes a look at it and suggests she dissect it to make a diagnosis. But Sheeta smacks some sense into her, apologizing for her degenerate behavior. Afterward, Kikla explains that she doesn't know much about phoenixes as they're very rare, and begins drooling over the idea of studying Phoenix. But before Sheeta can drag her away, it agrees to be a case study for her under the condition that she doesn't take it too far. As they start, she proposes a couple of theories regarding its change in appearance, and while Sheeta leaves the room for a second, Kikla suddenly switches to her crazed mood. This forces Sheeta to restrain her like a lunatic and carry out her instructions. After running some tests on him, they still couldn't come up with an answer, and Kikla suddenly pounces on Phoenix, asking to exchange nudes with it. However, the doctor shows up in time to restrain her, and afterward apologizes for her misconduct. After settling things with them, the doctor asks if it has had a normal bowel movement since its meal, and after visiting the loo, it reverts to its original form. On their way home, they all express how relieved they feel about his recovery. However, they are unaware that Kikla had snuck onto Phoenix's back. Some days later, after noticing that Alyssa Arms worried about something, Viola tries finding out what is bugging her from Luna. However, she refuses to tell her, replying that she's busy with a customer, and proceeds to rock the old man's world, while Phoenix prevents Viola from seeing such unholy scenes. After this, she tries to find out from Gurko, and even though she admits to knowing what it's about, she replies that she should stay ignorant, then distracts her by changing the topic of discussion.
I'm gonna come. Oh.
Later on, Viola thinks about who'd tell her what is going on, and when Phoenix suggests asking Fennel, her mood turns sour as she refuses his proposal. Later that day, she heads to Lyra's shop to ask if she knows who's visiting them, but is disappointed when Lyra says she has no clue and advises that she wait to see who it is instead of snooping around. Even after hearing this, Viola still tries to piece together who it is based on everyone's reaction to her questioning, and she almost loses her mind when Lisa says it could be her mother's past lover. Just then, a jacked redhead dude overhears them talking about Alyssa and walks into the store asking after her. Immediately they spot him, Viola becomes speechless, and Lyra gets pissed, putting out the blunt in his mouth. After apologizing for snooping around, he continues asking Lyra about Alyssa and soon gets attacked by Viola. Immediately he takes a good look at how hot she is. He can't help but hit on her, but Lyra stops him in his tracks, and Viola decides to reveal that she is his daughter, adding that she doesn't need a father as she thinks he is her lover. Hearing this, he gets knocked out, and while they think of how to bury his body, Alyssa shows up. Upon seeing Ori, she almost dies of a heart attack, and everyone almost has a stroke as they find out he is her father. When Alyssa explains how she got Viola, Ori becomes a bit relaxed, and Lyra points out that he looks quite young to be her father, only to find that he is about 350 years old, which stuns her. He then lashes out at Alyssa for not telling him about Viola, and claims that she's still too young to be a parent, but Alyssa replies that he's overreacting. After they become calm, Alyssa admits that she planned on telling him eventually since he would be a bad influence on her, which drives a dagger through his heart, and he proves her point by revealing that he couldn't reach her because he was charged for being with a nobleman's wife. As he tries to justify himself, he only makes matters worse, and this brings back memories of how bad he was while she was growing up. Even with this, Viola thinks he is a cool guy, making Alyssa panic as she doesn't want him to spoil her, and Lyra comments that Ori seems to accept having a grandchild so easily. In response, he admits that his family is complex anyway, and Alyssa mentions that Ori and her mum are siblings, which drives Lyra nuts. She further explains that Ori is a co-parent of his sister's child, clearing up her misunderstanding, and Ori claims that he is relieved that Alyssa is doing all right. He then states that he'd be on his way, which surprises Alyssa, who thinks he'd insist on staying with her. However, he acts surprisingly mature about the situation, and before he can leave, she invites him to stay for the night. But when Lyra snitches that he hit on Viola earlier, she suddenly kicks him out. Later that evening, while having dinner at the house, Alyssa reveals that her mum had visited Viola when she was a baby, but didn't stick around for long. Meanwhile, as Ori heads on his way, he can't shake the feeling that he has met Viola before. The following morning, when Lyra's hubby tries calling out their son for breakfast, he turns him down, stating that he doesn't want to step out of his room that day, and no matter what he tries doing, it only makes him want to stay locked in. After a while, he calls Viola over to help, but he doesn't fold, even when she reminds him they have a shopping appointment. After some failed attempts at luring him out, she then reminds him of how sweet he was when they were young, and finds it sad that he is now a grumpy teenager, while his dad apologizes for stressing her out, asking to be punished by twisting his nips. Although it sounds tempting to her, she decides to try unlocking the door with magic, but he holds it shut from the other side, which pisses her off, making her consider burning his room down. Following this, Viola summons Phoenix, who scolds him and makes him feel bad for cancelling his shopping plan with Viola without considering how she feels. She then takes the opportunity to ask why he doesn't want to come out, promising that she'll not mock him, no matter how stupid it may be, and he replies that it was because he couldn't fix his bedhead, which makes her summon Lyra to thrash him. After this, while his dad attends to his wounds, he admits that he really didn't want to go out with Viola looking like a mess, and his dad assumes that he has a crush on Viola, even when he denies it. Some days later, the group heads to congratulate Geeta, as her egg has hatched, and Lyra suggests they take her to the park to celebrate. On arriving there, they are met by Lady, who seems to be an old bud of Lyra and continuously tries to annoy her. In reality, Lady adores Lyra and wants to be her friend, but doesn't know how to express herself, only to end up saying the opposite of what she means. While trying to talk with Lyra, she ends up challenging them to a socializing contest, where the losers are banned from the park and Lyra loses her temper, eventually accepting the challenge. Afterward, she apologizes for involving everyone in their rivalry, but Geeta sees it as a good opportunity to get to know people. Although she claims that she isn't an extrovert, Geeta manages to relate well with some of the moms there, while Lyra watches over her baby, and Lady gets jealous that they're having fun with Lyra, forcing her goons to work hard so they don't fall behind. At the end of the day, Alyssa announces that it's a tie, since none of their kids got to be friends with each other, explaining that it's most important for their kids to have fun. And this settles the beef between the mothers, forcing Lyra and Lady to apologize to everyone. Finally, Alyssa sets them up to resolve their issues, and Lady realizes that she understands how she feels about Lyra. However, she ends up acting like a tsundere. Some days later, Alyssa and Viola decide to head out to town, and Alyssa leaves Phoenix in charge of the house. As they step out, it lays down some rules for the koala since it seems very violent, and it doesn't pay any attention to Phoenix, proceeding to rip up the curtains. Later on, Phoenix tries calming it down by offering it a snack, but this seems to make matters worse as it goes on a rampage, trashing the entire house. Shortly after Phoenix manages to put it to sleep, Alyssa and Viola show up to see the house messed up and put the blame on Phoenix, making it upset. After a few days of repeatedly stuffing Phoenix with pastries, Viola points out that he has become a mini planet, and Alyssa apologizes for overfeeding him. She then suggests they try helping him lose some weight, and Kikla pops out of nowhere to join the conversation, claiming she can help him lose weight through surgery while acting like a degenerate, which forces Alyssa to threaten to snitch to Sheeta. After she gains her senses, she advises them on the appropriate foods to eat to lose weight and suggests that they head out for some exercise. Shortly after heading out, they're shocked to see that she is too out of shape to move. However, she instructs them on the exercises they're to carry out. They start their summer body project with running and proceed to do some sit-ups, along with a couple more exercises, which Phoenix easily clears. At the end of the day, she hands out the results of evaluating them, commenting that she just wanted to be sure Alyssa and Viola are fit, and Phoenix thanks her for sincerely helping him. After a month of thorough workouts and a strict diet, Phoenix unexpectedly turns into a microorganism, and they go the opposite route, trying to get him back to normal. Meanwhile, Glind, alongside Fennel, decides to bail Ari from jail in exchange for knowledge on how to score babes. And even though Fennel is against the idea, Glind still believes Ari is the right person to teach him. However, Aris's advice turns out to be useless, as his idea of being charming is to be handsome, which upsets Glind. Just as Fennel suggests they take some advice from his brother, who Ari despises, he has a change of heart and eventually gives some reasonable advice to them. At the end of the day, they realize that there's nothing really special to it, other than thinking about how the lady feels. However, Ari also offers them a shortcut to picking up ladies and almost turns them into girls, if not for Alyssa's intervention. Some days later, Ori decides to hang out with Viola. However, Alyssa doesn't feel comfortable with them being together and keeps interrupting them. Later on, Luna and Gurko join the party, which annoys Ori, and he gets pissed that they all kept Viola a secret from him for a long time. The two explain that she wanted to keep it a secret from him, and to make matters worse, Alyssa admits that he was the only person unaware of Viola. When they mock him about being inappropriate for kids, he points out that Luna and Gurko are in his league, but Alyssa denies that fact. He also gets pissed that Fennel was in on it and calls him over to the house. Immediately after he arrives, they all begin teasing him, and Alyssa jumps to his rescue. When Viola asks Ori if he isn't bothered by Fennel's feelings towards Alyssa, he replies that he isn't worried as Fennel is too chicken to do anything about it, which triggers him. While talking, Ori finds out that even Glind knew about Viola before himself, and this hurts his soul, stating that he would only forgive them if they worship him. While he gets into a fight with Luna and Gurko, Viola asks Alyssa about her grandma. However, she finds it hard to respond, stating that she's a free-spirited person who's hard to understand, but she loves her very much. After Alyssa stops the girls from crucifying Ori, she proposes he take a look at some photos of Viola so he can know more about her, and pulls out a library of her photos, which freaks him out. After a while of enjoying her photos, the crew begins narrating stories of their time babysitting Viola, and Ari comments that it reminds him of his time bringing up Alyssa, which interests Viola. He then tells them of Alyssa as a kid and how he always got interrogated when he took her outside. After telling his story, he gets very upset when he finds that he is the only person who looks suspicious when walking with a kid, and Phoenix soon shows up to check what the commotion is all about. After this, Alyssa comments that Viola is still a child in her eyes,